Hey everybody, hey, welcome back to the 53206 cast. I'm Alex.
And I'm Meg.
And this is a podcast, Meg.
Mm-hmm.
This is a podcast. This is a podcast about... Well, I have two podcasts in mind.
Okay.
But I know you're tired, so I'm thinking maybe we just do... This is a podcast about conflict resolution.
I think that's a good, I
Okay.
agree with that completely. Yeah. We dealt with a lot of conflict resolution today at the We Got This Community Garden.
Did you think it was a lot?
I dealt with a lot of conflict.
Oh, you were in the middle of a lot of conflict.
I was literally, I was in the middle of a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Somebody, I feel like, and this is not the worst part, but the worst part for me was somebody pushed somebody onto a garden bed. And they ruined a few plants. And
no.
I was more mad at that than them pushing, them pushing somebody over.
Yeah. Okay. So, when I'm thinking about anything that you or I do, and when I think about, there's been a lot of shootings lately.
Yeah,
they've been, it's, obviously pretty much anytime there's a shooting, it's in the news and you hear about it.
Yeah.
And you hear about the ages of the people.
Yeah.
And, I never, we lived in the inner city for going on 20 years, and I've never seen an instance or heard of an instance of a shooting that wasn't preceded by conflict.
Yeah.
There's always, somebody's mad at somebody, or somebody, took something from somebody, or it's in retaliation.
Oh my gosh. Which happened, all of those things happened at the garden today in very smaller bits.
Sure.
Oh, somebody took his hat. Oh, somebody took his, fidget, and so it's just funny that you're saying that, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this all happened today. And then we did conflict resolution.
Right. So I hear about that. And then when I am, looking, not necessarily Facebook comments, because that's not really the spot. You're
probably on Reddit. Let's be honest
well,
here.
Maybe. I do like going on Reddit. The kids are always assuming that I'm on Reddit.
Okay, funny thing. So I went upstairs last night and I asked May what she was watching YouTube videos, and she was like, they're it's like a YouTube video on a Reddit post. And I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, you are definitely related to
she's my daughter.
Alex.
I don't think it was Reddit though. I think it was just in the news articles.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so there's a shooting, and the response is like, someone should do something about that.
Yeah.
And I think it's so tricky. When I used to work in schools, and I probably have told this story a couple of times. I worked with this one principal who wanted his school to be more welcoming.
Okay.
And you can't stand in front of a group of teachers at a staff meeting and say, we want the school to be more welcoming, make it more welcoming. It doesn't really work that way. So what do you do? Well, you have to think about what are 30 different things that we can do to make it more welcoming. And then, as a leader, you have to make sure that those things, not all of the 30 things, but I don't know, is there 4 things that we're going to go and try and focus on and maybe collect a little bit of data on? And are we going to celebrate when we do the thing that makes it feel more welcoming, and dream about maybe some of the things that we would notice if it is more welcoming? Yeah. And Meg, I'm sorry, you must have had, because I didn't hear that from the other groups, that you must have just had a highly
well, no, I was
a high conflict group today.
And I'm glad that you told me last year that 9, 10, 11-year-old kids fight more than anyone else.
Oh, sure.
And we had 5 of those kids in our group. So half of our group was that. And so there was these 2 kids that they were just getting into it, and they kept swearing at each other, which swearing is a no.
You can't do that.
And so my student leader kept saying, stop swearing, stop getting into it. She just kept on them. And, at one point I went over to her and I was like, okay, why is this such a problem? Why do they keep and she's like, they just can't get along with each other. So I kind of took one of the kids aside, and his whole body was rigid. And I was like, oh, you're ready. You're ready to fight,
Sure.
And so I was like, okay, I was like, did you sleep okay last night? Like, did you eat breakfast?
Sure.
I was just kind of like going through my, mom things of like, what could be wrong? And he just was having a bad day. Sure. And, and so like, I was like, hey, like, let's do some box breathing. Like, let's just like put our hand on our heart and like, let's just like use our breath to like calm ourselves down. Cause like, I did like, and he was on the verge of crying, and then he was like embarrassed. And, I just felt so bad for this kid. Like I know you don't want to be in this situation where you're like almost crying. You're ready. Like he's just ready to like lose it. So I was really thankful that like, I was like, do you want to switch groups? Like, do you think you would do better in a group without this other kid who you just keep, he just even kept looking at him. And then it was like his whole body would change. And I was like, clearly, like you and him just aren't getting along. And so we had lots of like, okay, let's stop and let's talk about this as a group. I feel like I tried, and I am not an educator. So I'm like, I'm not the best at this, I'm not. But I feel like I tried all the kind of things that I know that would work, and none of them were really working. And it just seemed like they both kept like going towards each other. And so, by the end I was like, okay, by the end of like, this was just even like, it wasn't even like 9:30. So it hadn't even been like an hour, it'd been an hour and a half. It didn't take very long. So I went up to you and just, said like, he's really trying, but he can't be with this kid. Can we just change his groups? And then he was fine.
Sure. Yeah. That kid ended up doing great.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
good.
Did real good.
But it was so interesting. His cousin was in the group, and his cousin actually got extra money because he worked so hard. So, nice. and so I was kind of talking with his cousin. I was like, is he doing okay? And he's like, well, his dad died. Yeah. And I was like, oh gosh, so like, I feel like you just get these perspectives, and you just feel kind of like an idiot. Like, well, why didn't I? And I feel like I was very like, I gave him the benefit of the doubt a lot, and I knew he was just having a hard day, and he was what, like a 11-year-old, like he's trying. So yes, I just felt like it was a lot of like, the first part was very much conflict.
Yeah, I don't know how, similar to the example we were talking about, making a school more welcoming. Like, I don't know how you teach conflict resolution unless you're like helping a kid work through a conflict. Yeah. I don't think that you can. I don't think like you can't take. I mean, sure, you can have a class, a 6th grade class called conflict resolution, but it's kind of the same thing that we do like when we teach kids personal finance. A great thing to teach kids. Yeah. But they don't have any money. Yeah, and so it doesn't make any sense. Like, you're not investing in the stock market because you're 14. Yeah. Like that would be fake. Good to have when you're like 25. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. But you don't have anything. And so how are you gonna like think about your personal finances when you have none of them? Yeah. Nothing's nothing's. That's what I'm looking for. Nothing's on the line. Sure. Yeah, because you're not actually investing in anything. Right. And so when like we can have all of these conflict resolution conversations with kids, but until they're in the middle of a conflict, or they're watching someone else be a part of the conflict, it doesn't really hit home. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, and I felt like we kept like, even like at the end we do a circle time, and that kid was no longer part of our group, and one of the questions was like, what worked well, and I said, it worked well that kid is in a different group. I went over, there's always going to be people in your life that you can't work with, and you need to advocate for yourself. And sometimes you have to work with them. But in this case, we didn't have that kid could go in a different group and could do well. And so I felt like I kept bringing it up over and over again. And, I feel like maybe that's why I feel like it was such a conflict filled day, because I kept bringing it up just to kind of like reinforce that's normal, that's okay, that's gonna happen, and let's treat it the best we can. Yeah. So this was the second week of We Got This. Yes. The first day of school, kids are typically on their best behavior. The second day of school, the shit hits the fan. The worst behavior. And then it like goes somewhere in the middle afterwards. Okay. So when I was running this morning, I was like, there's probably going to be something. Oh my gosh, today. Why didn't you say that? I feel like I would have been, because like last week I was like, everything is so easy. Yeah. you don't want people looking for
sure,
you know, and
sure.
you don't want to jinx it,
you don't
manifest it into the world that everyone's going to be in a conflict. I actually thought you were going to talk about the other conflict, which I thought was a little bit more egregious. Two kids, two 12-year-old boys, again, right in that timeline where they well, they're Dex's age, so 6th or 7th grade.
Yeah.
One of them took the other's hat or
something
you wear on your head. I don't know.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Sure. A ski mask, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. Kids shouldn't have taken the other kid's ski mask, and they ended up pushing each other. Yes. Is that the kid that fell on the floor? And
I was right next to it.
You were.
So that's why I was in the middle of that. Yes, and then I was like, "Come on, you just fell on some tomatoes." Like I was very angry, and then I was like, "Oh, they're in a fight." Like I didn't actually realize it at first.
And you know, it's even though I can be on a podcast and I can say all of the great things about conflict and how you can't teach conflict resolution skills without a conflict. It's not a fun thing to be a part of. You know, in my head this morning, I'm like, okay, there's probably going to be something, and that would be my role. There would be to you know, handle that, whatever way makes sense in the moment. And you know, pretty similar situation. You know, the one kid took the kid's ski mask and then got mad, and then he pushed him down, and then they're like rolling on the ground together. You know, it was you have a choice. You have a choice. And I learned this probably from working at the alternative school for so long. You have a choice when two young people are in a conflict and it's escalated to the point where you're like, okay, we can't have that happening. We can't. Meg, we didn't mention this, but and I forgot to count 2 people. We had 155 kids at the garden today. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. I mean, that's
our max is 125, so it is a bit more.
Something happened. I don't know. We gave out more tickets than we probably should have, so we had 30 more kids than we probably needed to have, and so we'll have to tweak some things with that. Not a bad thing, though, you know, to have 155 kids that want to wake up and be at work before 8 o'clock. Today was the first day we hit capacity, and like I said, I didn't do a great job of capping at capacity, but 155, that's a lot. That's a lot.
And I do have to say, just with that, it was neat. You know, we finish up and we do the circle time, and 2 of the kids said, it was like, what are you proud of?
Sure.
And 2 or 3 of the kids said, I'm proud that I got up early and came.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's like your first day of summer. That's awesome.
Right. Yeah. Because most of the kids finished school yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. It worked out. It worked out great.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a little nervous because I was like, who wants to go to work?
Yeah.
You
150
literally
kids.
just ended the school year, and now you're going to get up. Because, Meg, the first kids were there at 6:35.
Wow.
The guys up the street.
Yeah.
They like to be first, which is funny to me.
Yeah.
You know, so I can chat with them, and they help me unload some stuff. Good group of guys.
Okay,
but,
so you were talking about the kids who were rolling on the ground.
Yeah, so 2 12-year-olds. And, you know, when you get to that point, you're heated, and you're trying to separate. You're just trying to get them separated because you don't need the brothers and sisters and cousins. You don't need everybody. You know, now we're all fighting each other because, you know, your little cousin got into it with some other little kid. You know, that's not helpful.
And that was me separating them.
You did a great job. You did everything by the book. And so, you know, they kind of start to go off, and you know, typically when there's something like that, you know, the kid would get suspended, right? Because you need separation from the group, and you
need a consequence.
You need to
show that that's not okay to do.
Yeah, and I want to talk about something real quick because this is something that I have learned, you know, throughout my career as an educator, is that the consequence. Many people that I would work with would say that the suspension is the harshest consequence that you can have, but I don't always think that's the case.
I almost think, like, I feel like in parenting, they used to say, like, oh, just send a kid up to their room to be by themselves.
Sure.
And, like, now they're like, well, don't do that because, like, that's not like helping a kid. I'll like Dr. Becky, she would say that that's not an okay thing to do because like you should actually be communicating with the kid and they shouldn't feel like they're abandoned and they should like be communicating what they did wrong and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think what you're describing, well, first off, if we sent our daughter to her room, she would love that. And if we sent our son to his room, he would hate that. Obviously it's dependent on the kid. But I think what you're describing is that you have to be very thoughtful about consequence. And consequence should steer the kid back to what the expectations are.
Yeah.
And it should keep the kid from going beyond the expectations in the future. And so, the two guys kind of separated. I tell one, just go home. Just go. And the other one, I then go follow, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, where do you live? Do you live close enough to walk home?
Yeah.
What's
do I
kind
need
of
to
the
call
plan?
your mom?
Right.
Yeah.
And he had a sister that was there, and so he's like, well, my sister has a phone, and so I just wait over here by one of the other gardens. And I started asking him like, well, what happened? And he was telling me about really what he did.
Okay, was he the one that took the ski mask?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. And I'm like, okay, wait a second, because that is exactly what you want in that situation.
For somebody to actually like fess up on what they did,
and,
not say like it was my fault or it was my fault. It was my fault.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute, because if you're willing to do that,
that's
actually super helpful because now you've connected the dots inside of your head that says, I probably am kicked out for the day because I pulled this kid's ski mask off his head. I was playing around too much and it caused a conflict.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, all right, well, wait a minute, just stay here. And then I go to talk to the other kid. Hadn't made it too far down the street yet, and I run up over to where he's going, and he had the opposite response. And I thought, when you get that from a kid.
Well, wait. So he had the response because he didn't do anything wrong.
Well, he was the shover.
Oh, okay.
So he retaliated.
Okay, sure.
And I mean, that's a huge thing. Just it's lots of kids think that way. And even lots of parents think that way.
Yeah.
If you don't punch someone unless they punch you. And if you punch them or if you got punched, then you are free of consequence if you go and punch someone else. But that doesn't work. It doesn't work in school. It doesn't work
in life.
Yeah. Right? Like if you steal my bike and I go and steal your bike, we both have stolen bikes.
Yeah.
And now we both could be charged for stealing each other's bikes. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You can steal your own bike back, I guess, but well, whatever.
Yeah.
So I because I had gotten that first response from the first kid, I thought I want to see if I can talk this kid into it.
The second kid.
Okay. The pusher. And so I sat him down, and well, he didn't want to sit down at first. He was pretty mad. But eventually he came and sat down. I just sat there, and eventually they come and sit next to you. And I started talking to him, and I was telling him, and I was asking him, when do you think you become a man? And most kids would be like, oh, when you're 18.
Yeah.
You're grown when you're 18, right?
Sure.
You're a man. And I said, well, yeah, maybe, but I think you're a man when you start to take responsibility for yourself. And when you become responsible.
Okay.
And I said, I know 43-year-olds that haven't taken responsibility for what they've done. And I don't really consider them men. I consider them children who are old. They've never grown out of that.
Yeah.
And I said, I said to him, like, you have a choice. You're 12. You can make the choice to be a man in this situation and take responsibility.
Yeah.
Or you can continue to remain a child and not take responsibility. And you can see the light bulbs going off in his head, because every little kid wants to be grown.
Sure.
They love that.
Yeah.
And he said, I pushed him and I shouldn't have. And I don't want it. I feel bad for what I did.
Oh, good.
So then I went back to the other kid, and he was kind of like the group of kids that you had talked to about feeling embarrassed. So he had gotten pushed in front of a big group of people.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to be a bitch, was what he said.
Okay.
And I was like, well, I think the hardest thing to do is to not push back. Bitches might push back.
Yeah.
But if you, and then we talked about responsibility and, you know, and becoming a man. I had the same talk with him. And he came to the same conclusion. Yeah, I want to work on being a man. And so at that point then, you know, I said, well, I was going to send this other kid home and I was going to send you home.
Yeah.
But what if instead we like sit down and the three of us talk about it?
Okay.
And I said, you know, it's probably the type of thing you might want to apologize for. And I would apologize for the thing that you're taking responsibility for.
That's good.
And then we talked about what he was responsible for.
It's a great life lesson. Yeah. Nice job.
And so then the three of us sat down and the two of them, you know, said what they were
I feel like I'm
responsible
learning
for.
how to maybe how to apologize to maybe my spouse.
So, they sat down and they said what they were responsible for. And then they kind of went off.
Okay.
And I still said, you guys got to go. You're not going to get paid today. You're going to go home. And about 10 minutes later, I saw them just kind of standing around.
Okay.
Because the one guy was waiting for his sister.
Sure.
The other guy was waiting for his cousins and stuff.
Okay.
And it just occurred to me to put this back to the way that it should be, or to put it back to better. They should become friends.
Yeah.
And how do two people become friends?
They'd work on something together.
Yeah, or they have a conversation.
Yeah.
They find things that they have in common. And so I told the two of them, I gathered them back up over there, and I said, I changed my mind. I think if you guys can sit on this porch step and talk to one another until we're done, we'll pay you for the day. And I got to tell you, Meg, I do not want to sit. The one thing I do not want to do when I'm in a conflict with someone is sit there and try to see them as a human being.
And I'm sure like a 12-year-old boy doesn't want to sit with anybody.
41-year-old me doesn't want to sit and do that.
Yeah.
So the consequence was that they had to sit and talk to one another. And periodically I would go over there and I would ask them, or I would tell them, talk about the video games you play.
Okay.
Do you like basketball? I want you to talk about basketball for a couple of minutes. I want you to say who your siblings are or who your cousins are.
Okay.
And, by the end of it, they walked up together after everybody else had gotten, I told them, you guys got to wait till the very end. You walk up together, and they walked up together and got paid.
Wow.
And so, I think that is kind of what we're going for.
Yeah.
Is that when there is a conflict, you either want, to go back to baseline or to go back to whatever is a better version of that conflict.
Yeah.
And now these two young men, right, because they owned what they had done, have had an opportunity to prove that.
Yeah.
And to show that. And I don't know how you get to that without having something like
having a few bumps in the road.
Right, having a few bumps in the road, having a program that's kind of dedicated, with that mindset. Because it would have been easy. It would have been easy to tell them leave and never come back. Yeah, yeah. And that probably that requires them to internalize that the thing that they did was the reason. But no, we just need them to not play too much. We need them to be able to own the mistakes that they make and become better for it in the future. Yeah. That's so good. As long as the conflict isn't too much to handle, I don't mind a little bit of conflict. Yeah. I think it's fine. Yeah. It's fine with me.
Yeah. I think I had a lot of like really squirrely kids too.
And you mean a bunch of middle schoolers who had just gotten out of middle school? Yeah. And the first day of summer vacation? Yeah, that probably would be. Oof. Yeah, that probably would be.
But it was great. It was great. I feel like I had three people who were such hard workers, and one of the kids was new, and it was I feel like it's always an incredible day. It was fun. I was kind of reflecting with my student leader afterwards because she was like, man, that was a hard day. And I was like, do you want to be a teacher? She's like, no.
That's fine.
Which great. That's good to know. And I was like, I feel like we learned how to be better leaders today. And she was like, yeah, we really got schooled a few times. Oh, because
the only way to learn how to be a leader is to lead? Yeah, of course. Yeah, you practice it and you get better at it and you think about it and you learn from it. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you reflect on it.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Meg, you got anything to plug?
I think the only thing I have to plug is we have a great Amazon wish list that is on our website at wegotthismke.com. And so we would love to have some people purchase some of the things. We're trying to do some more like art stuff and vertical growing. So those specific things are on the Amazon wish list. So you can get to that from our website. There's an Amazon wish list right on the menu.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.